Welcome to the Flexible Curricula channel, your one-stop shop for anything education with your host, Nate Berman. Though we normally consult for schools and districts, we also strive to help parents who really want to be in the know for their kids' education. Now, this video really gives a deep dive into what is involved in a curriculum. Our goal is to see if your child's curricula are built for success in today's health climate. With so much of the classroom experience this year limited by health concerns, knowing what to do going forward is vital, so students don't find themselves perpetually behind where they should have been in the coming years. Over the course of this episode, I'll spell out some key factors necessary in a curriculum which supports students in any situation, like the current pandemic. So let's begin. As I said, the topic of this episode is building a flexible curriculum. Now, a little about me. I've spent a little over 20 years in the classroom. In that time, I've taught in inner city, I've taught in suburban public schools, I've taught in parochial schools, I've served in administrative capacities, including tech administrator, and I've been involved in 7 curriculum reviews that I've been very key member involved in such committees, 4 different schools, and I led 3 of those curriculum reviews. Over that time, I was able to cut instruction time for one curriculum by 2 months, saving 2 months of class time, allowing students to move even further forward. And the other couple times I've worked to completely gut and overhaul curriculum in order to be able to help move forward, achieve all the curricular goals, and work within limited time constraints of the schools involved. Now, just a quick key of what is not a full curriculum. Although many people might claim that these are, it really shows a bit of naivete if you claim that these are curriculum. First one, a textbook sequence. So if someone says, what's your curriculum? And you say Houghton Mifflin or this textbook company, that's not a curriculum. That's just taking the books they have and going through what they have. Next, a standardized test. If you are teaching exclusively towards a test, that's not a curriculum. That might give you some guides, once again, but it's not a curriculum. And the last one is teacher islands, where each teacher is working in their own little island, teaching their own class, but you don't have a cohesive unit to be able to bridge everything together. So the question is, what is a curriculum? This is a cohesive unit or units of instruction that are built from self-driven set of skills and content mastery objectives. Notice it's self-driven. It doesn't just involve content, but skills. Skills are the lifeblood for any successful student and any successful curriculum. Now, I've broken up here the successful key points that you need to have within a curriculum comparing to a standard one. Both standard and the successful have cohesive units of instruction. They both have a set of content, and sometimes you have some skills addressed in a standard curriculum, but they're lacking and they're not threaded well into the content matter, or it's disjointed and it leaves students or teachers a little bit stuck in order to be able to, 1, implement the curricula effectively, or 2, to be able to get the desired results to help the students along. Now, a successful curriculum should be self-driven. That means it's the school or district that has the specific needs in order to help the students move forward. You don't want someone far away to tell you how to teach your classes or what your students need. You know what strengths and weaknesses they have inherent in them, and to work towards those strengths and build those strengths up and help work on the weaknesses to build them up, so this way no student is really left and finds their whole K-12 schooling as a complete waste. The last thing, which is very vital, especially in today's climate, is built-in flexibility, the ability to move faster or slower based on the needs of the students. Once all these objectives are set, then the puzzle begins. Put in the content as you need in order to put it together. So every successful implemented curriculum starts with a scope and sequence. So let's just make sure for those who aren't aware what these terms mean. Scope. This is dealing with the topics that are covered and the subtopics and how much depth you want to go into these topics. The next one, sequence. This tells you the order that you're putting things in. It might involve which grades topics go into, or break it down by months per grade, or even weeks, or even every day. I've seen where a sequence is mapped out to that detail. Now, there's a lot of mistakes that are put together when a school or a district has put in scope and sequencing. Now, the main ones, and these are overarching mistakes, are age appropriateness. Are the students at that age mentally developed to handle the goals that are being asked? Mental development, we're talking about as students grow, the most important as they get older from middle school to high school is transitioning from concrete to abstract thinking. And if they're stuck in concrete thinking and you're applying abstract concepts, there are many students who could be left behind or frustrated and disengaged because of that, as well as different mental development stages, working from early ages, from toddlers all the way up through high school. The next one is that there's not a bit of flexibility involved to speed up or slow down. No, you have to go at this pace, even though everyone in your class knows what this topic is, you still have to go to this pace, and you can't move to more necessary topics to move forward and build students' strengths. Or you can't slow down. Students didn't get the lesson the first day. You need a second day to help reinforce. And then teachers are stuck moving along when the students didn't get this. I have an anecdote about this in a couple of slides, and we'll discuss how this, taken to an extreme case, can completely destroy not just an individual student, but an entire district. The next one is too narrow a focus for content, the why factor. If students don't know why you're learning something, they're not going to want to do it. And a teacher has the responsibility to be able to explain why. Now, it might mean that you have this and the next few chapters to put together in order to build an application. But if there's not a why should a student feel it necessary to engage? Just because you say so doesn't mean that students will and want to engage. Now, going through these in more detail, after this is focused primarily on content, and this is where you're lacking skills. And like I said, if you don't have the skills, students don't have the skills, it doesn't matter how much or how fast or slow you're covering the content, they're going to be left behind. So age appropriateness. When talking about age appropriateness, the question is, are students at a stage of mental development that they can process the outcomes desired for mastery? And if they're not, then you're going to find themselves totally frustrated and not wanting to engage. And a lot of times that level of frustration, even when they reach that level of age appropriateness, they're tuned out and they're disengaged because of the frustrations they had and the mental baggage they had from earlier classroom experiences. This is damaging on a long-term scale, and very few students have rebounded successfully from being dealt with age inappropriateness of content. Next one is pace flexibility. If there isn't enough cushion built into the scope and sequence, teachers are going to be stuck and students will really be challenged. This is something that will be problematic later on. One case in point, I had taught many, many years ago in an inner city school. In that district, I was teaching high school algebra and geometry at the time. At that district, every student in 9th grade had to take Algebra 1. Seems reasonable. But here is some data that showed that they had some flaws with their instructional plan, instructional layout. In elementary school, for standardized tests, 50% of students were passing. That meant only half the students by 4th or 5th grade really knew the material that was necessary to move on from elementary school. In middle school, 25% of the students were passing. What did that mean? The half of the students that were stuck in elementary never were caught up, never were given the support they needed to bring them up to par with the other students. And of the 50% that were able to get the elementary topics, only half of those were able to get it and grasp it and master it in middle school. Then you go to high school, guess what happened? For ninth grade and moving forward, going into ninth grade, when you're dealing with 25% of the students are ready for Algebra 1, and it resulted in high school testing, only 12% of the entire district student body, and we're talking thousands and thousands of students in the district, only 10%, 12%, of the student body had passed the math standardized test exam for that state. It's disappointing, but with a little bit of flexibility and extra support for those who were behind built in, no student should have been a victim of this situation, and every student should have been in a position to be successful. Now, students understand concepts age appropriate with higher applications in mind. And this is a lot of times where teachers at a certain level might not recognize the higher level applications involved, or that you need to move forward. Knowing place value is a very challenging topic for math students in first grade. Not everyone gets it. Therefore, addition, subtraction, regrouping, when I was a kid, it was called carrying and borrowing for addition versus subtraction. Here, the general term now is regrouping. However, when we're talking about regrouping, this is something that if they are given too young or not introduced in a way that can work within the mental development stage that students are in, they will find it very frustrating, and you'll have to continue to teach it in future years, delaying ability to move forward within your math curriculum. Also, when you get to Algebra 1 or pre-algebra, the idea of knowing x times x is x squared. If you built along your math program where they didn't understand multiplication is really a basic idea of finding the area of a rectangle, then they wouldn't understand x times x is x squared. They will continue to make the mistake x times x is 2x, and they're not going to be able to move forward. And I remember many years ago, an 8th grade algebra student of mine who was a very concrete thinker couldn't get past this and completely disengaged because of that. I wasn't prepared at that point to be able to give an effective answer to help that student move forward, to be able to understand and process this at her level of age appropriateness for mental development. I regret that, but I have learned and hope that I can pass that knowledge on to others, teachers, and schools as well. For English, tense, especially in young students, the idea of knowing present versus past tense in terms of verb usage makes it very complicated, not always so helpful. When you get a little older, knowing how to use a comma effectively is a bit of a difficult situation. Now, these aren't just potentials for concept in age appropriate, but it could be that you're teaching the concept ineffectively and giving misinformation for science. Models of molecules and atoms. I've seen a lot of mistakes in putting it together that teachers later on will have to unteach, as well as the idea of the concept because of how abstract this can be without putting it into very physical terms. As a comparison, it makes it very hard for those, as well as the solar system model, knowing scale in terms of size between the sun and the different planets, as well as the distance between the sun and the different planets. For all of these examples in science, it's a big challenge. Social studies, talking to colleagues, as well as seeing from my own personal experience in the classroom, I can see that for social studies, research is a big challenge, especially today, for students to be able to ascertain what information and glean important information from research and research sources, as well as to be able to parse out what is valuable research sources and what are research sources that might not be so accurate. To be able to, and that's a huge skill. And this is a skill that, if not actually built and harnessed within students and continually worked on, will hinder students to have huge success later on. Now, balancing skills with content, this is a very important thing. If done correctly, you're going to result in increased mastery, as well as being able to get through the material that much quicker. If you have the skills to be able to go through the content, it will just flow. Now, I'm oversimplifying it in that case, but that's the general path that will be able to make people successful. Now, what does this all mean? So when we're talking about this, scope and sequences you have to take a look at what you have. As if you're a parent, you have to look and see, is your school having a scope and sequence that actually is helping my child? The other question is, if you're a teacher, is this what's best for you? Now, you might not have the full understanding if you've always been an early elementary teacher or upper elementary or a middle school teacher or a high school teacher to see the full spectrum in order to see. But based on how so much class time has been lost for so many students and the cascade effect, to really master and maximize the scope and sequences that school has right now is vital more than ever. The next thing is curriculum reviews need to have all the key points for success that I mentioned before. They have to have skills woven in. They have to be flexible. They have to be able to have a drive that is put together by the needs of that community. If it's not based on that, you have a lot of redundancies and you have a less accurate, effective program in place. And the last thing is that you need someone who's very skilled in this manner to be able to help a school along. Some schools and districts are blessed to have such an individual working for them. Others need outside help. But it is imperative that every school and district does their due diligence to make sure they have the best personnel there in order to help maximize the effectiveness of the curricula in place for that school or district. And that involves possibly recreating what you have, gutting, amending, whatever is necessary to have an effective implementation for the next 3 to 5 years to put everything back on track or move further forward than what your previous plans were. Once again, this has been Nate Berman from Flexible Curricula, and I want to thank you for watching the Flexible Curricula channel. Please feel free to contact me at nateb@flexiblecurricula.com if your school or district would like some guidance in growing your students towards academic excellence. Please look forward to future videos, some on the halting and negative effects of grading and how subjective they can be in damaging students, as well as another video for parents, the 5 ways that you are hurting and destroying your child's education path with these mistakes. So please look forward to those videos. If you have other ideas that you would like to see, please feel free to leave a message, and I will love to hear from you and get back to you on this information. And as always, be well, be safe.